Hello and welcome to Sonder. My name is Maggie. I am a knitter, sewist, general crafter, bibliophile, and doctor living here in Denver, Colorado. How is everyone? Oy. These days are getting shorter. Fall is in the air, but it's still like 90 degrees here in Denver. Right now I am enjoying a really delicious iced soy latte that my husband made for me. He actually has recently got into something that I think I've showed a little bit off here, but he's gotten into roasting coffee. So he got a really fancy coffee roaster off of Craigslist and has been roasting all of the coffee in our house lately. And I asked him for some decaf and he made some for me just because I feel like in the afternoons and things like that, it's a little bit hard for me. And also with like recent anxiety, it's been hard for me to have a lot of caffeine. So it's really nice to have the taste of coffee because I really, really love the taste of coffee, but with a little bit less of the kind of like caffeine feeling, which I do go through waves of really loving that. But right now I'm just needing a little bit less. So yeah, this is really cool. He actually buys, I wanted to show this off. This particular one is from Ethiopia, and it's really cool because it's all from, I think it's like specific farms. And so he gets the green coffee, so it looks kind of like this when it comes. And you can see the greenness, like that it's green, and roast it with this really special coffee roaster. So I'm enjoying that, and it's been really fun. He's really good at it. And I didn't realize how much finesse there was to coffee roasting, but in general, you stop the roast at like you can stop it at like an infinite number of times. And so I think it's really about kind of the finesse and the art of knowing when you are finished and when to turn it off and then cooling it down really quickly. It's just been a really cool thing to watch him get into and also to enjoy for myself. So you will see me kind of sipping on that through the course of this week's episode. Oh man, I have not talked with you guys for like 3 weeks. It's crazy. I have been very busy, but for very good reason. So I have spent the last 3 weeks in an elective. So I've been learning about toxicology and anesthesia, and it's been great. It's also given me a lot of free time to kind of calm down and relax a little bit, which is really important. Sorry, I'm just gonna delete that. But it's really important in particular because I have a really hard month coming up. So my next month, I'll be in the pediatric ICU, or pediatric intensive care units. And I am looking forward to it because in medicine, when I was in the medical intensive care unit, that was the month that I learned the most of my entire first year of residency. But I'm also not looking forward to it because I think it will just be very emotionally draining. And so I'm kind of preparing myself emotionally for what next month will be, but have found a lot of solace and a lot of comfort in the things that I've been crafting and the things I've been reading. And so I'll jump into that. I spent the last week up in Steamboat Springs, Colorado, which is where I grew up. It is a beautiful resort town, ski resort town up in Northwest Colorado. And I'll put some footage at the end of the podcast about some of the hikes that I went on, but I feel like everybody has this really beautiful and almost sacred connection to home where they spent their childhood. And for me, I feel so lucky to have that be in one of the most beautiful places in the United States. And there are a lot of beautiful places in the United States. So for me, obviously, I'm very biased, but I got to spend so much time over the last week just in nature, connecting to the earth, and it was really healing and really powerful for me. So I hope that you get to spend a little bit of time outside exploring whatever you have near you, you know? You can find some of the most beautiful nature I've ever seen is actually in Central Park in New York. It is gorgeous, but yeah, there's lots of different ways to experience nature, and I just really, it was a really powerful thing to get to spend some time at home and connect with the mountains. I come from the mountains and I have a very strong connection with the rugged mountains of the Western United States. I just feel most at home and most calm when I'm in the mountains, and so getting to spend a week just slowing down and connecting back with nature was so wonderful. I also got to go to a wedding and be in a wedding. I was a bridesmaid for one of my best friends from college, and she actually got married where I grew up. So I got to spend last weekend with a bunch of friends from college just celebrating their love, and it was great. It was really great. Everyone was vaccinated, and I actually ended up getting a COVID test afterward just to make sure that I was good to go before returning to work, especially next month having to take care of a lot of really sick kids. The last thing I want to do is kind of give them COVID when they're already in the ICU. So it was negative. So yeah, it's been really wonderful to have a little bit of time off and be able to connect. But I also had a ton of time to craft. And so with that, I'm gonna just move on to a little bit of the crafting talk. Right now, I am actually wearing my Lydia 2.0 tank that I made out of some black cotton yarn that I had in my wool pantry. And yeah, I really love it. I've been wearing it all the time. I actually flipped it around. So this top is technically reversible, and you can have this deep V-neck in the front if you want. And I tried it on and it actually fits with one of my black bras. Like, my bra doesn't come out, but it just felt very sexy, you know? I think that it's something that maybe at one point I would love to wear it that way, but on like a date night or something like that, you know, like not necessarily for my little like knitting journal that I have on the internet. But yeah, I really love this. This is a really fun, and I think actually relatively straightforward knitting pattern. There are a lot of new skills you can learn, and if you've never lace before, the directions are really easy to understand, and it's really nice because you can knit this panel of lace at the bottom, and then you essentially just knit like stockinette with a few twisted stitches up the rest of the pattern. And so you can kind of think about something and have something really hard and then get through the hard part and just blast through the rest of it. So yeah, that's what I'm wearing. And then also in kind of craft adjacent talk, I got a new tattoo. So I can put a picture of this because it's a little bit hard to see, but I'll just kind of show it to you. There's still the tegaderm on it, so there's still kind of a protective film on it right now, so it'll be a lot easier to see on the screen. But this is a tattoo that I got inspired by The Name of the Wind and the kind of King Killer Chronicles series written by Patrick Rothfuss, which is one of my favorite new fantasy duologies. It's supposed to be a trilogy, but I don't think the third one will ever get written. Anyway, I just love that series and really thought that it would make a really beautiful tattoo. So maybe at some point I will talk about it. We'll see. All of the imagery, because it's a character, but then there's a lot of other things going on in it. And I would love to talk about it, but I also feel like this is like already gonna be like a feature-length film because I have too much to talk about. So we'll see. I might get to it, but I might not, in which case I will do it when it's more healed. But yeah, let's start with some crafting talk, shall we? I have a lot to talk about. I've been doing some sewing. I've been doing some knitting. And that's kind of all. But, okay, let's get the quick and easy things out of the way first. So I have put quite a bit of work on my Ripple Crop Top by Jessie made. This is being knit out of Juniper Moon Farm in a linen cotton blend. and I really love it. I've actually finished the back piece and then, or sorry, I finished the 2 front pieces and then got most of the way on the back piece when I ran out of yarn. This is all the yarn that I have left. And so I need to buy another skein because I still need to finish knitting the back of this, and then I need to pick up and knit both sleeves, and it's short sleeves, but I really want this to be like the pattern itself. I don't want to kind of, because in some ways I could just bind it off now, but I just think that would look not as good, and yeah, I want it to be nice. So I'm gonna buy another skein of this yarn, but it's kind of going into timeout for right now because I was kind of bummed when I ran out, to be honest. I thought it would be enough, but c'est la vie, you know. This yarn ended up being a DK weight yarn, which I think is why I did not have enough, is because I didn't realize that it was DK weight. So yeah. Anyway, this is the Ripple Crop Top by Jessie made. I think it's gonna be really, really comfortable and a great addition to my summer wardrobe probably next year, because I doubt that I'll get it done in time to wear it this summer, which is crazy. It's almost fall. It's actually that time in the year where the nights are getting a little bit longer and you can just tell that the angle of the sun is a little bit different now. And so, I don't know, I love those transition times during the year where it's definitely still summer, but I can just feel things changing, and I love that, particularly because I love fall and winter. It's my favorite time of the year. So yeah, but the Ripple Crop Top by Jessie made. The next thing I will talk about is another summer knit that I'm actually knitting out of the same yarn. I cast this on before we went on vacation because I needed something that was going to be simple stockinette, and so this is the same yarn but in a different colorway. So this is Juniper Moon Farm Zooey, which is 60% cotton, 40% linen. And this is in this beautiful yellow color. And with this yarn, I am knitting, let's see, what is this called? The Heya tank by Kyomi Burgin. And this is just a really simple V-neck tank top. And I am knitting and knitting and knitting. Right now I'm just, it's knit bottom up. And so right now I'm just knitting the stockinette. And I decided to do this as a rolled hem because I thought that would be really cute. And yeah, I am really enjoying this. It is a little bit hard on my hands to knit in linen and cotton yarn, and so honestly it's something that I can't knit too much of in a day because it just, I don't know, I think the fact that it's not, that it doesn't have any spring to it makes it so that it can actually be a little bit painful, not painful, but it can just, after a while it wears on my hands in a way that knitting with wool definitely does not. So yeah, I'm really enjoying this. I am a little bit nervous again because this is a DK weight yarn, which I didn't really realize, and the Heya tank is also written for fingering weight yarn. And so I'm having a little bit of a crisis where, again, I'm not sure if I'm gonna have enough yarn, but I think I will. There's less positive ease to this, it's not in ribbing, and it's just the tank top. So I'm playing a little bit of yarn chicken, but I think that it will work out. So let's all hope together that it will be fine. But yeah, I really like this yarn. It's a really, really lovely combination. I find it, I've talked about this before, I find it a little bit hard to knit with just linen. And so I feel like the cotton gives it a little bit of tweediness and fills in a little bit of the gaps that I have had trouble with linen yarn. So, but it still has that beautiful shine and beautiful drape that linen yarn has. So I am enjoying this. I think that I will hopefully have some more summer tops to wear next year, and we'll hopefully finish both of these in the next couple of months. But honestly, I find my desires to knit certain things kind of shifting towards more winter things, fall things, and also we'll probably be moving a little bit more into Christmas knitting and gift knitting. But all right, the last sort of summer-ish thing that I'm going to talk about is actually kind of a tale of woe. I feel like I'm like probably getting you guys all down right now because these last three, I'm like psyched about them, but there's some things that I'm just not sure about. But this one is definitely going to get frogged. So this is a lovely pattern that I just made the wrong size of. So this is Farmer's Daughter's Fiber in the One Stag colorway, which is this beautiful kind of mauve-y pink colorway. And this is the Globe Braid Bra by Taylor Owen. And I don't know if you can see the beautiful, there's a beautiful cable that runs up the front and the back, and it's a racer back bra. And really, I just knit the wrong size. I mean, this thing is like teeny tiny. And I tried it on and it like fits around my body, but does not fit at all in the way that the pattern is supposed to fit. And so at this point, I'm trying to decide if I want to knit the next pattern size up or if I want to knit something different, because I also have the other Jessie made design that's kind of a bralette that has slipped stitches down the front and the back, and I think that would also be really beautiful. And I think I just need a little bit of a break from this pattern because I knit all of this and now I'm gonna have to rip it out, and I feel like I'll probably just want to knit something different. But anyway, that is the Globe Braid Bra, and I actually have this in my knitting bags, which I made for a few of you, and those are in the mail as of today. So sorry, my life just got crazy and I wasn't able to get them in the mail until today, which I felt pretty bad about, but they are in the mail now. So look out for them because they are on the way to you. All right. The next thing I have to talk about is a sock whip. So I have been knitting on these socks, which is out of this beautiful yarn, which is from Tuscan Knits. I got her sort of like Western United States inspired sock sets, or it was like a mystery skein club, and this is the colorway Indian Paintbrush, which is a really beautiful, it's my favorite wildflower that we have here in the West, and it's this vibrant orange. And I have knit a sock with this. I am actually just to the point where all I need to do, I don't know why I didn't finish this before the podcast, all I need to do is Kitchener stitch the top of the toe, but what I have knit is a 2x2 cuff with a heel flap and gusset, and then a reverse stockinette foot back into a stockinette toe. I was just feeling funky. I wanted there to be a little bit of intrigue with it, but also have it be really simple. It's really comfortable, and yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. I love the vibrant, beautiful nature of this yarn, and this yarn has quite a bit of mohair in it as well, and it just gives it this really beautiful halo. So yeah, I'm really excited about this and excited to cast on the second sock. I think that it will be really, really beautiful knitting for me when I'm working 28-hour shifts every 4 days next month. So that'll be fun. It's gonna be brutal. I forgot to talk about this, but I actually also did cave and buy some linen quill to knit myself a 50/50 triangles wrap. So hopefully that will come this weekend and I'll be able to cast on and bring in the yarn so that during my overnight shifts when I'm stressed, I can have a very soothing and simple thing to knit on. I'm really, really looking forward to having that, especially because you're like sleep deprived and you've been awake for like 20 hours and you're having to stay awake and make sure that all the kids are alive and not decompensating. And so I'm really excited to have such a soothing, beautiful knit. I ended up not going for the yellow color. I actually ended up going for the original colors that the pattern is knit out of, which is kind of a it's called like Kiln Red and like Poppy Red. So it's kind of a bright red and then a more muted red that's really beautiful. I'll put a picture up here, but I'm really, really excited for that. I think that it's gonna be so soothing. And I decided to go with that. I love yellow. I think yellow is my favorite color right now, but I decided to go with red because I have a lot of yellow sweaters and I felt like I would probably get more use out of a red shawl than I would out of a yellow shawl. And we'll see. There might come a time where I decide to cast on another one because it seems like everybody's obsessed with them. And I love the Cady Jax podcast and I'm just feeling like I want to be part of it. So I don't think I'm going to be able to make it to Rhinebeck this year. My life is just way too busy and frantic, but I am going to take part in my own special way. And Kat and I have talked about maybe having our own little like knit night. So we should try to organize that, Kat, because I also just want to hang out with you. Anyway, the next thing I will talk about, I'm kind of saving, oh gosh, I have so many things to talk about. This is going to be, just strap in, just be prepared for a very long podcast today. The next thing I'm going to talk about is the Forest Berry jacket. This is by Helena of Fabel Knitwear. I love all of her designs. I have knit 2 of her sweaters now. This is my 3rd one, and then I'm actually planning on casting on one of her jumpers, her other sweaters for my Christmas sweater this year because I've decided that I want a really beautiful dark green piece fleece Christmas sweater this year. Anyway, that'll be for another time. But this is the Forest Berry jacket by Fabel Knitwear, and it is a really beautiful cardigan that has this cable and bobble motif going along both sides of the front. It is cropped, it has puff sleeves, and I think it's gonna go beautiful. I think it'll be something that I can wear at work, and then also something that I can put on a pair of jeans and wear it outside of work. And I am knitting this out of Brooklyn Tweed Loft in the sweatshirt colorway. So it's just, in my opinion, the perfect gray. And it has these flecks of lighter wool and also of black in it, and I just think it gives a really complex, really beautiful color. This is a sweater that I cast on forever ago. I don't actually know when I cast it on, but this whip might be a year old. Like, I've had it on the needles for a really long time, and I don't know why I stopped knitting it. I think I got to the point where, first of all, I think I spilled a little bit of tea on it and I was sad, but it's right here and I can hardly see it. So I think it's fine. And the other thing is that this is a little bit challenging only because you have to do cables on the wrong side as well. And I am someone who, I really read my knitting a lot when I'm knitting, especially cables. And so it's really hard for me to read cables on the wrong side when you're just looking at this like weird blank slate of stuff. And so I definitely found that a bit challenging when doing this knit, but it's just beautiful. And I think I'm gonna wear it all the time. I also need more fingering weight sweaters in my little murder of sweaters. I don't know, what's a like grouping of sweaters? Just like murder of crows, murder of sweaters. Anyway, I don't know. Why did my mind go there? That's very weird. I think it's probably because I love true crime. I'm actually wearing right now these earrings that my husband got for me. It's a little bit hard for you to see them. Let me see if I can get closer. They say SSDGM, which is a reference to my favorite murder podcast, which is like my favorite podcast in the world. I love it so much. But anyhow, I'm just all full of tangents today. Hopefully you're still here. And if not, goodbye and thanks for being here. Anyway, this is the Forest Berry jacket and I really, really love it. I actually just started knitting on this the day before yesterday. And it was one of those things where I picked it up and I was just like, I have no idea where I was. I don't know what needles I was using because there were no needles in it. I had stolen the needles for something else. And that is a great time to use your skills of reading knitting and find out where you were. So essentially what I did is I counted the number of stitches that I had and then found out where I was at the sort of increase for the waist shaping. And then I looked at this part of the motif and found out where I was in the cable bobble motif. And then I just picked a random, I actually picked a different size needle than what the pattern called for, because I was looking at the fabric and I was like, this needle size that she called for was way bigger, would give me a much more open fabric than what I had been knitting before. And so I actually went, I think, 2 needle sizes down, which I'm a very loose knitter, but I just did it. And I actually had knit from this charm up to here, so about 2 inches. And I then measured the gauge here and then at a similar spot down here, and it was the same gauge. So I think I kind of nailed it, you know, I kind of nailed it. I was just going with it and just letting what happened happen. But I will say, for any sort of newer knitters or people who are less comfortable with reading their knitting, I think that that would be a beautiful time to put in a lifeline, which a lifeline is essentially just you take an extra piece of scrap yarn and you put it through every single one of the stitches that are on your needle, so that you have the stitches with the needle and then another thin piece of yarn through the stitches, and then you just keep knitting. And what that does is that if you were to keep knitting and find out that it was the wrong place in the pattern, or you forgot to do some increase or something like that, then it's very easy to just rip back to that one spot and start again. So I highly recommend that. That is something that I did a lot, particularly when I was learning how to knit, so that I would know, and you just mark on your pattern where you put it, and that way you know if you're knitting lace or cables or things like that, you don't have to knit, you don't have to rip out your whole sweater, you can rip out just to a certain spot. So, little tip. All right, the next thing I am going to talk about is, oh, I'm just covered in yarn right now. The next thing I want to talk about is a sweater that I am working on for my husband. So if anyone has watched my Christmas time vlogs, my, what is that called? Vlogmas? If anyone's watched my Vlogmas, they have probably seen that I was working on, during the Christmas season of last year, was working on a sweater for my husband, and it was a disaster. It ended up, the colors ended up bleeding and the yarn ended up felting, and it was a disaster. Literally, I was in tears because that was supposed to be my Christmas present for my husband, because my family does all handmade Christmas, and it was awful. But I reached out to Fancy Tiger Craft, which is where I had bought the yarn, and they refunded me fully for the price of the yarn. And so I am finally knitting Sean that sweater again in a different yarn. So right now I am knitting the Sanguine, I'm not sure. The Sanguine sweater by More Thunder, and I'm knitting it out of 5 different colors of Brooklyn Tweed Arbor, which is their really, really beautiful yarn that is DK weight, and it's 100% American Targhee wool. So I'm knitting this out of 5 different colors, and I will just show them off here. I have knit almost this whole sweater because I meant to finish this for Sean's birthday, but ran out of the white yarn, and so I just said, sorry, and we'll finish it this week. I actually was just able to go back to Fancy Tiger and get the rest of the yarn, but this is it. Sweaters for tall people take so long. And I am a tall person, but I also usually knit cropped sweaters, so this is This was a lot of knitting. And I've done this all since our last podcast. I love it. So this is a top down sweater that is entirely color work, and you're repeating these motifs that are actually like relatively large motifs. The sweater is really, really beautifully designed. I really, really love it. It's been really fun. It's been a little bit of a challenge to just like knit the same sweater again, but I've still really been enjoying it, and it's so fun to see Sean like really excited about it. So this is gonna be a really warm sweater. The fact that it is DK weight and all color work, it's kind of a double layer of DK weight yarn. It's gonna be very warm. So let me go through the colors. This is Klimt, which I love as someone who loves art. This is a reference to Gustav Klimt, who is a really, really incredible, I believe, Austrian artist who was really known for putting a lot of gold leaf into his artwork. You've probably seen like the Kiss. I actually put that on my, I saw a couple of the Gustav Klimt pieces when I was at the MoMA, and so I actually put that a couple of podcasts back when I was talking about New York. But anyway, this is Klimt. This is Potion. The white is Hammock. Then this is a little bit hard to see, but it is Fleet. It is a navy blue. And then this is called Treehouse, which is a dark teal green. So I'm really, really loving it. I think that Sean really adores it. And I did make some modifications to this sweater. So the first thing that I did is I used the same method to do the sort of double knit rib in the top of the sweater that is used in the bouquet sweater. And so you can see that it gives this really beautiful finish, and then it's double knit. I don't know if you can see that, but I did that. And then the other thing I think is so wonderful about making your own clothes is that I just had Sean try this on. So originally, I think that the separation for the sleeves was actually supposed to happen after this motif. But as you can see, I separated for the sleeves about 2 or 3 inches before, probably 2 inches before I was supposed to. And that is just because Sean is tall, but quite slender. And so I wanted to make sure that it didn't feel like a tent on him, and also that he'd be able to wear it with jackets and things like that. So those are the only modifications that I made. And of course I knit it longer than the pattern called for, but it's really easy to do that modification because essentially you just continue the pattern in the sequence until you get to where you're wanting to finish. So yeah, I really loved it. I just, as you can see, have a very small bit of it left to do. So hopefully it will be a finished object for the next podcast. Sean would definitely like that. And yeah, I think for Christmas, I'm gonna get some Let Lopey and knit us some matching Let Lopey cardigans, because I just think that would be adorable. And he asked specifically for a Let Lopey cardigan in very neutral colors. So I actually think that I'm going to copy Nicole of the, oh, I think her name's Nicole, the Gentle Knitter podcast. She knit this really beautiful Let Lopey cardigan in one of her very early episodes. I think it was called like the Weatherman cardigan, but in Icelandic or something like that. And I really want to knit that sweater in a very similar color scheme to what she did. So that is some Christmas knitting on the horizon. I just have one more knitting project to talk about, and then I'll move on to a little bit of sewing. And I'm actually just going to turn around and take down this swatch because that's what it's related to. Okay, so I am joining in the Marie Wallin knit along, and I am going to be knitting a couple of different things, but I'll talk about both of them, why not? But the first thing that I'm going to talk about is the Yell cardigan. So I am knitting the Yell cardigan, which will be my first ever steeked project, my first time working with Shetland wool. I'm so excited. And this is the gauge swatch that I made to look at all of the colors and see how they would go together. You can see I actually have a basket full of all of my colors right here, and I just wanted to go through them. So this is the swatch. The only thing that I'm going to change on this swatch is I didn't love the yellow that is here and here. I just felt like it was a little bit loud for what I wanted to have in this sweater in particular, and I think it draws the eye in kind of a, I don't want to say vulgar, but like kind of a vulgar way. And so I am going to change that yellow out, and I am going to replace it with this creamy yellow. So this is more Jameson Spindrift, and this is in the like buttercream or buttermilk colorway, and it's this really beautiful yellow, lighter yellow. So I'm actually gonna replace the lighter yellow here and there. And then I don't know, I think that I'll probably just in the moment decide. I think one thing that could be nice is putting the green with that light yellow. I might end up doing the darker yellow with the lighter yellow here. And here, I don't know. I might do the lighter yellow or the darker yellow. I'm not sure. I think I'll just kind of see what happens as things come, but I love it. It's so soft. I know that a lot of people think that this would be scratchy, but I do not think it's scratchy at all. And I think I'm gonna wear this so much. It also has really beautiful drape. I'm so excited. I'm really, really excited. I just need to get a couple of things off the needles before I fully commit to casting this on, because I know that once I cast this on, this is all I'm gonna want to knit, because I love color work. The motifs are really wonderful in that all of the motifs are really short. I'm gonna get really excited about steeking for the first time, and I'm also doing this as part of the Marie Wallin knit along, which there are a ton of different podcasters who are part of this knit along, and we have a little Instagram group. So if you want to join, let us know and we can add you to that, where we all just go on and talk about our knitting. It's so, so wonderful and so fun to be part of a community. Like I said, I don't have a ton of friends who really like knitting, and so that is kind of the way that I can connect with people, and yeah, it's really great. The other thing that I want to knit for the Marie Wallin knit along, I forget the name of it, but I will put the name and picture of this pattern here, but this is a really beautiful colorwork scarf that actually uses a lot of similar motifs within this, and it's a pretty short scarf. I think when it's wrapped around, it only goes to here, and I'm probably gonna make it quite a bit longer because my husband was so sweet to buy me another advent calendar for this year. So last year I got a sort of October Halloween advent calendar with a bunch of mini skeins, and this year from the same dyer I got her like Christmas advent calendar. And so I'm actually gonna put all of those together and use the advent calendar to make just like a really beautiful and like exquisitely ugly scarf. I'm really, really excited about it. I think it'll be really fun. So I think that my plan for right now is for that to be my like Christmas Eve cast on, is because at that point I'll have all of the colors and things like that, so I'll kind of know, and I'm just gonna put them together willy-nilly, and some of them will probably get lost because I think there are some speckled yarns and things like that, but I'm really, really excited. So yeah, whew, that was a lot. That is all of the knitting content that I have today. And I'm gonna move on to talking about a couple of things that I have been sewing. I've been neglecting this beautiful and delicious coffee that Sean made me. So, in my last podcast, I talked about how I was getting really excited about sewing some placemats, and I just wanted to show a couple of finished objects of those placemats here. So these are placemats that I sewed for 2 different people's weddings and 2 different people's birthdays. So, and I decided to sew a couple of extra ones for myself, and that's what these are. And I should say all of these are sisters but not twins. So none of them are the same, but they're all using roughly the same fabrics. And you can see that I quilted them. So they're really sturdy, and did the binding and everything. So there, I kept this one. Sorry, Yampa's running around. I also kept this one. And made some out of a totally different color palette that I also kept 2 of. And this one. I really, really love sewing those up. Quilting is very fun, especially on such small things, because you just get so much bang for your buck, you know? You're just sewing all these little things, you finish it really fast, it's really enjoyable. So I think that there will probably be many more of these in my future, and they are fantastic handmade gift options. So if you guys ever want me to go through how I make these, then I'm happy to put up some tutorials, but they're really, really easy and highly recommend. So they're so cute. And you can just throw them in the washing machine, it's great. So, all right, that is all of the crafting talk that I have to talk about. And so I will move on to the many books that I have read in the last couple of weeks. All right, books. I have like 8 books to talk about, something like that. So I will start with the books that I have finished reading, and then there's one more that I borrowed from my library. Whew, all right. I have my notes up here because I can't remember every single thing about all of them. I mean, I remember the books, but I don't remember like exactly what score I gave them, etc. So the first one I want to talk about is Damnation Spring by Ash Davidson. This was great. I think I ended up giving it like 3.5 stars out of 5. It is a book that is about several different families that are living in the redwoods of California in like the 1960s and 70s. And it's at this time where they are all loggers. And it's following them and another group of kind of environmental activists and researchers who are discovering that not only is the logging really detrimental to the environment for the fact that there's a lot of landslides and things like that because there aren't trees that are holding the mountainside together, but also that the pesticides that they are spraying onto the woodland are causing a lot of issues, not only for the plants and animals that are in that environment, but also for the people that are living there as well, causing things like cancer, birth defects, multiple miscarriages, things like that. So lots of trigger warnings for miscarriage in particular, and fetal demise and things like that. But also, it's a really wonderful historical fiction novel that has quite beautiful prose talking about the forest and the woodlands and just sort of the characters and the people who are all working together. And the thing that I thought that was really interesting about this was that it mostly focuses on the lives of the loggers themselves. And I think it's really important for us to remember that people are impacted by these decisions that are made in multiple different ways and have multiple different needs. And yeah, it was just a really fascinating thing to see it from that perspective, because for me, I studied ecology and evolutionary biology in college and come from a very liberal family and a very environmentally conscious family. And so I have always read stories from the other side, sort of from the environmental activists and learning about the good work that they were doing, but haven't had as much time thinking about the blue collar workers and how this was going to impact their livelihoods and their families and things like that. And so I thought it was just so beautiful and so interesting that it was written from that perspective in particular, and getting a little bit more knowledge into how the people living there are impacted by this in multiple different ways, from the sort of miscarriages and recurrent birth defects and things like that, but also from the loss of income and the loss of their job and the loss of their land and their livelihood and their homes in a lot of ways. So yeah, it was really fascinating and really interesting and beautifully written. So if you are a fan of historical fiction, I recommend it. It's great. The next book is actually 4 books that I read, but I only have the first, and this is my first ever graphic novel, and boy, did I love it. This is Heartstopper Volume 1, but I read Heartstopper Volume 1 through 4 by Alice Oseman, and I gave them all 5 out of 5. I'm obsessed with this. I think the thing that was interesting is that I was a little bit worried about reading graphic novels, because I felt like the thing that I really love about reading is the artistry of the written word and its ability to make me connect with characters. And I was worried that I wouldn't get the same feeling from something like this, but boy, was I wrong. Now, this is the only graphic novel that I've ever read, or the only group of graphic novels that I've ever read, but this made me feel all the feels. I was like laughing, I was crying, it was so soft and so heartfelt. This follows 2 boys who meet and fall in love, but it's got a lot more going on than that. So one of them is out at school and was actually outed by, well, I won't get into it because I feel like that's kind of a spoiler, but one of them was outed like in the last year, went through a lot of bullying, and is out at school and is doing better now, but has had a lot of stress and anxiety around that. And the other one is kind of coming to terms with his feelings of attraction and intimacy with this boy that he met in his new homeroom class. And it's so soft and so beautiful, and they have such a wonderful relationship, and it also shows a lot of mental health struggles, and talks about things like eating disorders in men, and anxiety and depression and things like that, but in such a loving and compassionate and understanding way. It is so wonderful. The other thing that I noticed, which it's funny that I didn't think about this before, but I love art. I love painting and drawing and just seeing art. I love art so much. And of course, a graphic novel, it's more than just the art of literature. It's also the actual art and drawings and pictures that are depicted within the story. And it's amazing how well Alice Oseman allows us to see what the characters are feeling, and even subtle things that are happening within their thoughts. It's wonderful. I really, really enjoyed it. Highly recommend. Oh man, there are quite a bit of trigger warnings in this, particularly for like bullying and things like that, and then also obviously for mental health issues. So look into the trigger warnings before you read them. And there are actually also on the website, so these are all free. Alice Oseman has them up for you to read, so you don't have to have the hard copies to read them. They are on the internet, so if you just search for Heartstopper by Alice Oseman, you can read all of them. And on the web comics, Alice Oseman will say, if there are particularly challenging chapters, they will put in there a trigger warning for that specific chapter. So it's great. I love it. I'm obsessed. This is the only thing that I've ever read by Alice Oseman, and I know that there's a bunch of other things that they have written. I actually don't know what pronouns they use, so I'm just gonna go with they, them, theirs. But this is the only one I've read so far. I really want to read, I think they wrote Loveless, which is about a person who is on the asexual, aromantic spectrum, and I really want to read that because that is something that I've never really read about before. So yeah, highly recommend Heartstopper by Alice Oseman. The next book that I read is Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. This is a really fantastic science fiction adventure story about a middle school science teacher, but has a PhD who ends up needing to try to save the world from this global threat. I don't want to say much more than that, but the thing is that it takes place, it's a really interesting story where it takes place mostly on this going back and forth between two different timelines. So one of the timelines is him waking up on a spaceship in outer space. He doesn't know where he is. He doesn't know his own name. He's forgotten everything. And his two crew members that were with him are dead. And he just has to try to piece together what's going on. And then flashing back to kind of what was going on before he was sent on this mission and what this thing is, and it's kind of him remembering things, and that's how the flashbacks happen, or kind of him being, you know, going through something on the ship, and then all of a sudden that will trigger a memory, and then the memory will kind of give you a little bit more insight into what's going on. I'm trying to be very vague because I really don't want to spoil anything, and it's really fun. I gave this 3.5 stars, and it was lovely. I think for me, the character development was great. There's beautiful depictions of friendship. It's so interesting. I really, really enjoyed it. I thought it was so fun. The science is really good. I want to look more into Andy Weir and kind of what his background is, because as someone who has spent a lot of time in the kind of biology realm, and the main protagonist of this is a biologist, it was really interesting to kind of learn about biology, and it's a lot of things I was like, this is very accurate. This is very accurate. And so it was really fun. I highly recommend it. I would say, you know, this is a book that you can feel very safe reading, because there are obviously some trigger warnings just because he wakes up on a ship having lost his memory and his friends are dead. Sorry, I'm talking so much. I'm getting so excited. My throat's getting so dry. But in general, I would say this is more fun than it is scary or stressful. It is more on the fun, interesting side of things. And I would actually say it would be a good thing to listen to on a car ride if you have 10-year-olds and up, or maybe even 9-year-olds and up. It's a pretty family-friendly story. There's no there's very little discussions of sex, and there's almost no curse words at all. So yeah, it's great. Okay, the next book that I read is Survive the Night by Riley Sager. This is a thriller/horror novel about a woman who is having a lot of stress at college. Her best friend was just murdered by this serial killer, and she just really, really wants to get home. She doesn't want to be there anymore. It takes place in the 90s, and so she goes to the ride board at her dormitory, and she finds someone to sort of hitch a ride with home, but in a relatively safe way for the 90s. It's someone who presumably went to school with you and is also driving in a similar direction. And so she takes a ride with this stranger, but then starts to wonder if that stranger may actually be this campus serial killer. So, I loved it. I think that there's been a lot of ups and downs of some people really liking it and some people not liking it. And it's fairly predictable, and there's kind of the trope of the woman who's not all there, and maybe has some mental illness that's impacting her ability to process the world around her, etc. But I thought it was really fun and kind of spooky and interesting, and I loved I think serial killers are so interesting, and so for me it was just fascinating. I don't know, I thought it was really fun. I gave it a 3 out of 5. It wasn't you know, a heartbreaking work of staggering genius, but it was pretty fun. I thought, in my personal opinion. So yeah, man, I have also read Home Before Dark by Riley Sager, and I think these are about even for me. Like, I think both of them definitely had flaws, but were also like pretty fun and interesting, and like the perfect combination between kind of like thriller, mystery, and horror together. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. I mean, there's definitely flaws with it. It's not a perfect book, but I had a really fun time reading it. So yeah, it's great. Survive the Night by Riley Sager. If you're like into serial killers and into like thrillers / horror, then check it out, because it's interesting. It's got an unreliable narrator. You're like, what's going on? What's happening? Why is it happening? Primo. My last 2 or 3 books I have to talk about are all 5-star books. I had a great reading month. Like, I really liked the majority of the things that I read. So the next thing I will talk about is something that I listened to from my library, and that is Anna on the Edge by AJ Sass. I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. This is a really wonderful middle grade story about a little girl named Anna who is a figure skater, and she gets this new figure skating coach who comes up with a new routine for one of her performances, and she's like a very good figure skater. She's like a nationally acclaimed figure skater who is, I think she's about like 12 or 13, and the new routine that she has is very feminine. She has to wear a dress. It's about like a princess, and she realizes that maybe she's not a little girl, and it's about her going through the process of discovering what her gender is. And I'm still using she, her pronouns, because at the end of the book, those are the pronouns that she decides that she's gonna use. But she is also non-binary, and that is really important to her, that, you know, this is the beginning of her process and beginning of her discovering that she doesn't love this feminine stuff, and she isn't this little girl that everyone thought she was, and coming to terms with her gender and coming to terms with what pronouns she wants to use. And also what I really loved about it is it was very clear that this was just the beginning of her journey. So, you know, this is something that's really confusing for kids and really important to get right. You know, I think that providing love and support to children as they're going through this, it can either make it so that they have a really hard and a really rough time, or that they can feel supported and loved and allowed to navigate this non-binary world and find out where they fit into that with love and support. And it's so important, you know, this is something that's important to me on a personal level, because I have a cousin, a little cousin, who just came out as non-binary, but also from the other personal level is that I am a pediatrician, I am a doctor, and I see the negative impacts of when kids aren't supported. I have spent a lot of time working at Urban Peak, which is the homeless shelter for youth here in Denver, Colorado, and it is so saddening how many of those kids are transgender or non-binary and have been kind of kicked out of their homes for just being who they are. And the rates of suicide and things like that in the transgender and non-binary community are extremely high for both adults and children. And getting people's pronouns right, it is a public health crisis. It is humanity. It is just being a good human being to someone else and recognizing who they are and what they need from you. And yeah, anyway, I'm like getting really emotional about this, but I thought this book was really wonderful and was recommended by one of my favorite YouTubers who is transgender, and they give fantastic recommendations and also push me to learn more and grow more and be better. So anyway, highly recommend that. It is middle grade, like I said, so it's a really fast and easy thing to read. It's actually written, AJ Sass is a non-binary figure skater, and so it's actually written by someone with lived experience who really understands what this character is going through and writes with compassion and empathy. And it's also just like middle grade is so soft and so comforting to read. It's just so wonderful. So yeah, I highly recommend it for all ages, but think that it would be something really important for you to read if you don't really understand what it means to be non-binary. You can kind of go on the journey with Anna and discovering what that is and what it means and what pronouns are and what's important and how to treat someone with kindness and love. And yeah, anyway, please read it. It's really good. The next book I want to read or want to talk about is Infinite Country by Patricia Engel. This was so good, and it's so short. This book is only like 200 pages long, and boy did it pack a punch. Like literally by the end of it, I just want to show you the last thing that I read. And I might read this a little bit because I think it's really important, and I don't think that it will give anything away, but literally the last sentence I just wrote, wow. Like I was just like, holy fucking shit. So this book follows a family that has been separated by deportation. It is about a family who, part of the family lives abroad and part of the family lives in the United States. Part of the family are US citizens because they were born in this country, and part of them are not. And it's about the devastation of being separated from your family. It is about the journey to try to get back together. It is gorgeous. It's one of the most beautiful novels I have ever read. It is absolutely breathtakingly beautiful. Whew, man, it is seriously so gorgeous. So I wanted to read this little bit because I actually do think that this is really important when you're thinking about people who don't have US citizenship, who don't have documentation, and having compassion and empathy for them, and also understanding that just because they don't have that paperwork doesn't mean that they're any less of a person. And I don't think this is a spoiler alert because like the whole story is about this. So, you already know me. I'm the author of these pages. There's more to the story of me, but this is what you need to know for now. I've had borders drawn around me all my life, but I refuse to live as a bordered person. I hate the term undocumented. It implies people like my mother and me don't exist without a paper trail. I have a drawer full of diaries and letters I never sent to my grandmother, my father, even to my younger sister, that will prove to anyone that I am very real, most definitely documented. Photos taped to our refrigerator, snapshots taken at the Sandy Hill house or other friends' fiestas, the Sears portraits our mothers used to dress us up for every year, making us sit on bus seats, still as statues so we wouldn't wrinkle, to have a perfect picture to send back to her mother. Don't tell me I'm undocumented when my name is tattooed on my father's arm. This assigned status wants you to think of the US government as another kind of parent, the one who rejects you for its preferred child. Sometimes I feel bad for having ever longed for those papers. So who I am isn't enough. Why should I want to be identified as gringa, reciting the pledge they made me memorize in school before I even understood English, if the government makes it so clear they don't want people like me here? Maybe that I don't have the documentation they want is good. It means they don't own me. Mic drop. I also realized like I've been using the word undocumented, and yeah, I have so much to learn. I'm still learning so much, and this was a beautiful read on my journey to understanding the lives of those around me more. So, holy shit, please read this book. It is so fucking good. This is one of the best books I've read this whole year. Like, so good. And I will say the same about the next book that I'm about to talk about, and that is Detransition Baby by Tori Peters. So, man, I don't even know how to begin to talk about this book. This is the story of 3 people as they navigate a pregnancy. And I'm being a little bit vague. So essentially it follows 3 different people. One of them is a transgender woman. One of them is a man who was previously living as a transgender woman and may or may not want to transition back to that in the future, is kind of navigating the world as being a man again after being a woman for a very long time. And then his coworker who he got pregnant. And it's about them kind of thinking about making a 3-parent system and working together. And man, it's so interesting. It was written in this way that just made me feel like I was living through this short period of time with these 3 people and learning more. So it's kind of written in flashbacks and then sort of present day and from like multiple different perspectives, and it gives a lot of insight into what it means to be transgender in the United States right now, how unsafe it can be to be trans in our world, navigating a system that is totally different from what we're used to. You know, I think oftentimes people think of a family system as having 2 parents, and I thought it was so interesting to think about how that can evolve and be different than, you know, what we necessarily thought. It was so interesting to read about how not all women can have children, and how hard that is and how devastating that can be for women. And it's, yeah, and not all women want children, but you know, if you're a woman who does want children, then the sort of devastation of not being able to do that is, oh gosh, it was so powerful. I also wanted to read a little bit from this book, and this is also not going to be a spoiler, but this is just sort of friends who are chatting and talking about, you know, why, sort of questioning why it's so hard to just treat transgender people with the same like respect and dignity and love as you would treat anybody. So anyway, I really enjoyed this. Okay, I found it. Fine reshifts focus back to Katrina to hide her miffed feelings. So anyway, what advice do you want about the situation? I don't know. Katrina pauses a moment to find the correct words. I suppose I thought there were rules. I Googled what to do if you think that you have outed a trans person. I read a bunch of feminism blogs about it. There are strict rules. Apparently, number 1 is don't out trans people in the first place. Yes, Iris says, that's a good rule. Right, so I thought I'd come over and confess what I did, and you, she indicates Reese with a little thrust of her chin, would tell me what to do. The word confess startles Reese. I'm not a priest, Katrina. I'm not going to tell you to recite like 10 Hail Transgender Marys and absolve your sins. This is what happens when the only trans voices out there are the loudest, shrillest trans girls constantly publishing dogmatic trans 101 hot takes to rebuke the larger cis public. You get people thinking that in order to avoid offending trans people, you must locate and follow a secret guidebook filled with arcane rites instead of just thinking about them decently as you would anything else. You get one lady assembling an impromptu transgender focus group to assess how she should take the kind of basic responsibility that she clearly knows how to take in the non-trans populated situations of her life, while another lady is going around gender-neutralizing bathrooms because she doesn't dare ask Ames what he prefers in a direct, respectful manner. So good. They're just, in this book, there are just little bombs dropped like that all the time, where it's just like, it's not that hard. Like, just treat them with humanity and dignity that you would everybody else that you know. Like, yeah. Anyway. So good, so good. So those are all of the books that I read, and then there are a few books that I am currently reading right now. One of them is The Wise Man's Fear, so I am still just plugging along at this. This is something that I'm trying to read slowly and savor, particularly because the last book has not been written and probably will never be written, so I'm just trying to enjoy the story and not go too fast. So The Wise Man's Fear, I am right now on page 631, and yeah, I'm a little over halfway, so I don't want it to ever end. So yeah, I'm trying to like read this slowly and really savor it. So yeah, I'm reading that. And then I'm also reading Local Woman Missing by Mary Kubica, which is a really interesting and pretty scary thriller that I am actually quite enjoying right now. And lastly, I am also rereading Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. I am a little over halfway finished with that. Right now, they are on their extended camping trip and just went to, where did they just go? They're on their extended camping trip and they just went to Godric's Hollow. So that's where I'm at right now. But yeah, anyway, this has gotten really, really long. I was thinking about maybe talking a little bit about my tattoo and the symbolism behind that, but I think that for now, I will just leave that to another time and leave you here with some beautiful scenery from my many hikes that I went on in the mountains of Colorado. So I really hope that you're doing well, that you're taking care of each other, that you're taking care of yourself, that you're taking a little bit of time to connect with nature and enjoy the last few days and weeks of summer. And hopefully I'll talk to you soon. Please send me warm thoughts and kind words for next month. It's gonna be a really challenging month for me. I think there's gonna be a lot of tears and a lot of sadness, but also hopefully a lot of beauty and a lot of learning. So yeah, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and I'll see you soon. Bye.